the ease of doing business in the hosted country. The procedure, is it easy to establish the business? Is there one-stop shop in the government that facilitate all the procedures for the investors? For the domestic or local investors, it's easy to deal with these procedures. But for the foreign investors, it's difficult to go and invest overseas, far from his government, and not find the legal structure that protect their investments. And if there is no restriction on transfer of capitals and repatriation of the profit, which is very crucial for the foreign investors. And the last point, if this country has investment protection agreement with UAE and avoiding double taxation agreement. These two agreements are very important for the investors of UAE. Why is Nepal? Why we are interested in investing in Nepal? In terms of trade, Nepal is, or UAE, considered as the third largest trading partner for Nepal, with an amount of $300 million US trading between two countries in last year. So that reflects the link of cooperation in terms of trade. In terms of investments, we are a new investor in Nepal, and we are exploring the potential of investments here, and we would like to have a strategic investment projects in Nepal in different sectors, and we are keen to develop in partnership with companies from Nepal or individually in developing some projects. We identify some projects, and we are already, some of our investors concluded the agreement as a joint venture, and we are going to witness some of these development and cooperation in this forum, and the rest will come soon. So as we see that the reform of the Nepal reforming of economic regulations, policies, it's a clear vision for the government of Nepal for the sectors they would like to develop and the priority of these sectors, and they have a clear pre-visibility studies for these projects and the return on investments of these projects that facilitate the task for the foreign investors to come and invest where the identification of the projects is there. What we found also, the accessibility from the investor to the government. With all ministries, with all ministers that we approach, or our investors approached, we saw that the doors are open for them. There is a dialogue from the government of Nepal and our investments. They tried their best to facilitate the obstacles of there is any requirement from our investors related to the projects or their investments. The profitability of the project or the investment projects here in Nepal is very high. The return is very high comparing to the rest of the world. And Nepal is in between two major countries, which is a big market for us as China and India. Politically, we have strategic partnership agreement with both China and India, and UAE considered one of the top 10 investors in India. As a trading partners, China is #1 trading partner for UAE, and India is the second trading partner for UAE. And UAE is the third largest trading partner for India. So yes, we are a small country, but we are the second largest economy in the Arab world, and it is very dynamic. We are the third largest re-export hub for trading. So these are the features that when we strengthen our economic and trade relations with Nepal, not just to attract investment in Nepal, but connecting two markets together, UAE with Nepal, that will facilitate for other investors to benefit from UAE as a market, as a gateway for their products to the rest of the world. And I'm sure once we attract a major investors from UAE, the rest will follow, not only from the UAE, but also from the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And we heard the very fascinating story about UAE. We started with perhaps some hesitation or some suspicion towards foreigners coming to the country and investing. But then I think after that, the remarkable progress and the growth which UAE has achieved. So now it is become itself a very big FDI in other countries. So that's, I think, a very good story for us. And also your checklist of points which normally an FDI or investor looks for, I think that's a very useful one. And I think Nepal is also working in the same line. So we are in the same wavelength. So we are trying to improve those 7 or 8 points you have mentioned. Now, may I turn to another continent? Let's go to Africa now. In Africa, South Africa is a country which had a very historic transition in politics, somewhat like Nepal. They also had a number of problems or issues in their politics of their country. But it was one of the examples, remarkable stories of how they successfully concluded their past conflicts among the people and then became the most successful economy in entire South African continent. So that's a remarkable story. And in Nepal also, you know that we had a period of our economic, political turbulence. So that time, I remember with a group of business people, when we look around the world, then South Africa was the first country we thought of. That this country, they have come out of this political turmoil very successfully. So what can Nepal also learn, perhaps, in this transition from political insurgency and turmoil to a successful country? So we visited your country, especially looking at the peace-building process and also the role of the private sector, which they had played in transforming this, so that economy also became a very important topic of conversation or agenda for the entire country. So I think we would like you to reiterate, if possible, in a few words, that how did you manage this transition from a very bad political situation to a very successful economic powerhouse of Asia? So Ambassador Jaffer from South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Jyoti. I think one of the key things that we've learned from the transition, that it's a long transition. It's a process that it's a long journey. I mean, we talk about the journey of 1,000 miles, but for us, it's a long journey. We're still undergoing the journey. We've done the economic, the political transformation process, and now we are busy with the economic transformation. And really, the bedrock of it is collaboration. You need to ensure, I mean, we have ensured that all our stakeholders are part of the process. And I mean, I have no doubt that given the process that Nepal has gone through, that Nepal will also actually get out at the end in successfully. But for us, really was the issue of saying that we need to get policy certainty. We need to have an idea of where we want to go. We need to have a shared vision of where we want to go to. And that was a process, I would think that as we went through a constitutional process, we ensured that every stakeholder, every, business, civil society, government, all the political parties had an input into the process. So that in the process, as we designed our constitution, that was effectively a process where everybody felt that they were part of it. So when the constitution was adopted effectively and it set the framework for where we're actually going to, everybody felt they were part of the process in that context. And we've also ensured that effectively that we grow the economy. In order for the shared vision to be realized, you have to grow the economy. And that really was the challenge for us. We had to actually move from a process where the economy was really focused on the minority of the people to making sure the economy and the fruits of the economy is being shared by the majority. So that process is underway within the context. But we've managed over the last 20, 25 years to basically grow the economy 4 times in size to what it was. And that's been the strength. Granted, our growth is a bit anemic now, but that's within the current context, but we are still growing within that context. So, for instance, we are one of the largest economies on the African continent. We've ensured that we kept on investing in economic infrastructure to continue to grow. I mean, that really is the sense. We have an enormous amount of economic infrastructure in South Africa, and that's been rated globally within that context, and we continue, the South African government has continued to allocate resources to ensure that that economy continues to grow. We are the most diversified economy within the African context also, and that is something that we treasure. We're ensuring. We started from a mineral and mining background, but we ensured that we broadened the economy so that manufacturing is one of our key elements for us now within that context. So the whole focus is the issue that you need to build on the past successes. We're building on the historic nature of South Africa, ensuring we're quite a large economy, quite a large country. We're a large economy within that context also. And yet, I mean, I think like Nepal, 66% of our population is under 35. So we have a very youthful population. And that's really the whole notion of where we were going for the future, that it's a small economy, it's a young population that actually can walk into the process, ensuring that you do transformation. Because we have found that in the issue of transformation, as we transform, the older you are, the more resistant you are, and the more difficult it is to totally transform or quickly transform. So for us, the balance and the hope is the fact that we have quite a young full population within that context. I mean, as an economy, we're ensuring that we add value to the economy, and that really is for us the key. And the collaboration is in such a way that our private sector is part of our process. So we know that we have to grow, but we also know that we can't grow in isolation. So if one looks, for instance, at the trends of South African businesses in where they've invested abroad, if we look in our top 10 over the last 15 years, the top 10 investment destinations, 6 of our destinations of the top 10 are in Africa, because as an African country, that's our neighborhood. But then, I mean, and this is where I think it's interesting for Nepal. The next other 4 countries, the first is the UK, United Kingdom, the US, United States, Germany, and then India. So if South African businesses can actually come from South Africa to India, it's a small step to come to Nepal. And that really is the opportunity that exists for us, is to engage the Nepalese businesses and chambers to make sure that South African business are aware of the opportunities that are here, effectively. Because if they've come to India, it's a short hop to come to Nepal effectively, so they've garnered. So within that context and that's the opportunity, I think, in the process. The future is a shared future for us. We believe that it has to be a shared future. In a global context, it has to be a shared future. The South African economy is also very open. I mean, we've ensured that we deal in the global space. So we are one of the key exporters globally within that context, because we believe in open borders, ensuring that you grow in that context. So our key businesses in South Africa, I mean, if we look at our automotive sector, which is one of our key sectors, they produce over 500,000 cars a year. Not that it's sold in South Africa, but it's sold globally. And that really is what business is about, is looking at the bigger picture of ensuring that you continue to be part of a global environment, a multinational, multilateral environment. And that really, for me, is the key essence of that. And that's why I'm hopeful that, you know, together, South Africa and Nepal, we can actually go together.
Thank you, Ambassador Zafar, for sharing your very valuable and rich experience. If you permit, I'll come back to you with another question in the second round, because we have to learn a few more things from your country. And also, I would like to, I'm very, very honored and pleased to see our ambassador from South Africa to Nepal, who is resident in Delhi. She's also here. So thank you, Excellency, for coming here and supporting this conference. So may I now turn to our next panelist, Mr. Stephen Swartz, who is from the Fitch Ratings based in Hong Kong. He'll talk about a very technical topic, which most of the Nepalese, I don't know, our participants know about this topic, but I think for most of the Nepalese, perhaps this is a topic which a lot of understanding still needs to be made. We haven't really understood. He's going to talk about sovereign ratings. In Nepal, recently we introduced credit ratings for the individual companies because of the requirements of the banking sector. So this is also new for us, but many of us in the private sector, we are getting used to it slowly. But this country rating is something, sovereign rating is something we hear about once in a while, especially from very organized and professional multinational companies who come here and they analyze the country's risks. I think this is one of the ratings probably they calculate or take into account when they analyze their investments. But frankly speaking, we have absolutely no idea of what this means and how can such a rating help attract foreign investments, and how have the other countries done it successfully, use this tool to attract foreign investment. So Mr. Swartz, can you share your experience and knowledge on this subject?
Thank you, Mr. Jyoti, and thank you to the organizers and to the government of Nepal for inviting me to represent Fitch Ratings to discuss how sovereign ratings in particular can be used to attract foreign investment. I'd just like for a moment to reflect on my own experience with Nepal. I visited exactly a year ago for the Blended Finance Conference, and there was a great deal of enthusiasm a year ago about prospects in Nepal and investment. And I was very eager to see on my visit this time whether that enthusiasm had been maintained. And I was very pleased to see, and I think evidence of the very terrific turnout at this conference, that enthusiasm is not only intact, but if anything has increased over the past year. And the buzzword I think I heard a lot about was political stability, which is very dear to us when we do sovereign ratings. And so I think certainly the foundation is there for investment flows into Nepal, and that is indeed very encouraging to see. Listening to the sessions and the long list of people and organizers and agencies and participants to thank, there was one agency I thought was left out of the thank you list, and it's an agency that's very far away from Nepal. And I don't think it's an agency that thinks much about Nepal, but its signals and actions recently will have a profound effect on investment flows to Nepal, and that's the U.S. Federal Reserve Board, which recently did a U-turn and signaled that rather than hiking interest rates for the rest of the year, it's planning to keep interest rates low or even unchanged. Some market participants even think the Fed might begin cutting interest rates before the end of the year. That has a big impact on countries like Nepal because the pool of investment flows, investors searching for yield increases. So that's very favorable for Nepal. Cyclically, Nepal is facing a global financial market with strong appetite to invest. And in fact, I think as the moderator in the previous session hinted, that if you're successful in Nepal in attracting these flows, you may soon find that you face an opposite challenge, which is how to manage these flows. And we've seen many countries, when they return to markets and they have political stability, investment flows in, and it becomes a big challenge to maintain a stable macroeconomic environment. And that's something certainly that we look at in our sovereign ratings, is not only the political stability, but the macro stability, a topic I can return to in just a moment. Turning now specifically to the world of sovereign ratings, which you said is a topic, it's certainly not a household topic in Nepal. But the truth is that the pool of countries without a sovereign rating is shrinking all the time. We at Fitch Ratings rate now 118 countries globally with sovereign ratings. Here in the Asia-Pacific region, we rate 20 countries. In this region alone, countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, Pakistan, and Bangladesh all have sovereign ratings. And they've used these ratings to signal to the international community that they are committed to transparency, good policies, and they want to be open to investment. So first and foremost, I think that's what drives countries to seek a sovereign rating. There are four other areas I would like to highlight. The second is that a sovereign rating, and we also apply a country ceiling, even more technical, it signals to investors sort of where a country ranks relative to other investable countries. It's sometimes the very first step that an investor who doesn't know a country well might take. They might go to their Bloomberg terminal and look up what is the rating for this country. And it gives them a benchmark. Okay, I know what I'm dealing with. It guides their focus on what to dig deeper into. So it's often the very first thing we believe that an investor will look at is where a country ranks. These sovereign ratings are an ordinal ranking. They go from AAA at the very top, so in this region, countries like Australia and Singapore AAA, along with the US. They go all the way down to default status. Fortunately, we don't have any of those countries in the Asia Pacific, but just to give you an idea, Sri Lanka is rated single B at B+, Pakistan is at B-. And when I look at the metrics of Sri Lanka and Pakistan and I compare them to Nepal, in some metrics Nepal compares very favorably on metrics like GDP growth, volatility of inflation, low government debt, starting with a clean slate. A third area where countries look for sovereign ratings is it provides a benchmark to their domestic banking systems and corporates. When banks and corporates and investors know where the sovereign rating stands, it helps guide where the corporate and the private sector can position itself in raising funds from the international community. Fourthly, it enhances the efficiency of the domestic capital market and gives access to a country in raising funds in the international community. So certainly international bond investors will look for a sovereign rating in knowing how it fits into their risk profile. And lastly, and I think this is an important and sometimes overlooked aspect of a sovereign rating, is it gives country authorities themselves their own track record and benchmark and scorecard of how are we doing. So if a country starts off, let's say, with a B rating, they may have a target in mind. In a certain number of years they want to achieve BB status or eventually investment grade status. And so it's a good check mark for themselves on how they're doing in the various categories. Now to your question about what can countries do to lift their ratings and attract foreign flows, this is a very technical subject, but just to summarize it, there are essentially four key pillars of sovereign ratings that we look at. One is macroeconomic performance and macroeconomic stability. And as I said, in the recent past, Nepal has done quite well in that regard. But it is noteworthy, and I don't want to be a party pooper here, but if you read the latest IMF report, the fiscal deficit in Nepal has widened, the current account balance has widened, and these are things that as the country tries to achieve high growth rates, it's going to need to keep a check on. A second area is political stability. A third area is external finances, the current account I just mentioned, reserves. And a fourth and very important area are structural features. So things like governance indicators feature very large in our sovereign rating methodology. We look at the World Bank governance indicators, and Nepal ranks relatively low, and there's scope to improve those over time. Things like control of corruption, regulatory quality, government effectiveness, voice and accountability, just to name 4 of the indicators. So I'll stop there, and I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwartz. I think among the various components of what goes into a sovereign rating and how it is can be used to enhance the country's attractiveness, I think that's a very valuable lesson. And I know that in the modern world and modern economic age, Nepal also has to step up its efforts and use such modern tools. We cannot keep out of it for far too long. That, I think, seems to be the message. And perhaps that such rating also gives an incentive to our own government, our country, or our private sector. There is a target to improve. Here we are, and here we have to go. So I think that probably spurs the progress, governance, including governance in countries like ours. So that seems to be a very useful tool. But I'm sure with the government, people who are more knowledgeable with this issue, they should be talking to people like you, I think, in the coming days. Thank you very much, Mr. Schwartz, for your contribution. May I now turn to Malaysia, which is a country, I think, very much admired in all over the world, and especially in Nepal, because the transformation they made from a small economy which nobody heard about in the world into a very valuable and very dynamic economy, not only in Asian map but on the global map. So this transformation, I think, is one of the amazing success stories of Asia. So I think at fellow Asians, we are very proud of the progress Malaysia has made on economic front. So I must compliment and congratulate you, sir, for your country's achievement. And we also heard that his organization, MIDA, has played a very important role, a catalytic role, in achieving this transformation. So Mr. Shiva, who's the executive director, so can you please tell us, in this amazing transformation of your economy, what was MIDA's role and how did it promote the investment in your company so successfully? I think they did a few things very unique, which other countries probably didn't do it. So probably that will be a very important and interesting lesson for all of us who are here. So Mr. Shiva, can you please share your experience with us?
Thank you, Mr. Padmajoti. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Nepal government for inviting Malaysia, or MIDA in particular, to be in this forum. Let me first introduce MIDA, or Malaysian Investment Development Authority. Now, Malaysia actually, we got our independence in 1957. Yeah, 10 years later, MIDA was established in 1967. 3 years later, we set up our very first office in Germany to attract investments. Can you believe it? Yeah, a 3-year-old organization having an office in faraway country in Germany to attract investment. Over the since 1967, we have 20 overseas centers worldwide. We have 3 in the United States, we have 6 in Europe, and the rest in Asia. And all these overseas centers, if you notice, most of it, 99% I would say, are in the capital exporting countries. So ever since we got our independence, we were very clear. It's an open economy, it's a trading nation, and investment is critical. Yeah? And that was the main role and function of MIDA, Malaysian Investment Development Authority, to attract foreign direct investment. That was in the 1960s and 70s. Now, MIDA, although it is an investment promotion agency, many may not know this, that actually we are also very much involved in the what you call policy formulation. We are always behind the scene. The Ministry of International Trade and Industry is there, but we are the one who actually feed information based on what's happening around the globe. In the 1960s, when MIDA was very much established, what we did was we came up with this, what we call import substitution policies, because the unemployment rate was very high. Yeah? In the 1970s, we did exactly what you guys are doing currently. We went all out to promote export-oriented industries. There was a time when we set up free zones. Yeah? In the 1980s, we were moving towards heavy industries. Again, a lot of policies were formulated. In the 1990s was the time when we defined what is high-tech. We were moving towards high technology industries. We defined what is R&D, what is high-tech, what is S&T, MTS index, so on and so forth. All right? Then, in year 2000 onwards, we were talking about services sector. We were promoting more of investment into the services. Yeah? And of course, today, we are talking about e-commerce, yeah? Digital economy and industry 4.0. So this is the transition of the economy. And MIDA has always been there. Yeah? Not only as an investment promotion agency, but also the agency which is very much involved in policy formulation, including investment incentives. Now, what is so unique about MIDA, yeah, which I would like to share with you? First and foremost, we are an investment promotion agency. What does that mean? We need a face out there. That's the reason why we open up offices. Yeah? Many of the countries worldwide, what they're doing is that they're using the embassy. Yeah? You have the trade counselor there who does all the promotion. Would they be able to do what MIDA able to do? I don't think so. Yeah? How do you attract investments? Gone are the days where you sit and you expect investors to come to your shops. It doesn't work that way anymore. We have to identify the companies. We have to fix appointment. We have to knock on their doors, and we have only 1 hour to present the case. Maybe half an hour, maybe 20 minutes to make the presentation. Another 20 minutes to discuss. Within 1 hour, you're out of the office. And that's what we are doing. And it's not easy. I would like to share my experience when the very first time when I was posted to Germany in 2006. I met a company. I was so excited with so many slides. I want to convince this guy. This is the first company that I met. Not even 10 minutes, the guy stopped my presentation. And he told me, Mr. Siva, for you, time is not money. For me, I have to earn the 1 hour I'm going to spend with you. Can you go straight to the point? You understand? This is reality. Yeah? And each and every project that we bring in, a lot of efforts goes into it. Today you have this Nepal Investment Summit. Fantastic. You have thousands of businessmen sitting here listening to you. But that is not enough. Yeah? We have to do this almost every day. We do seminars, we go and meet the companies one-to-one, we negotiate, so on and so forth. Yeah? And of course, we also do all other investment seminars. We have our ministers. Our trade ministers travel all over the world every year. About 5 to 8 missions is undertaken. And we also, within MIDA, we have 10 industries division. Each of the division undertake 3 to 4 missions all over the world. They identify the companies, they go, they meet, and then they try to convince the company to invest in Malaysia. So, investment promotion is number 1. Now, very easy for you to convince the guy to come over to Malaysia, let's say, to your country. Number 2 is approval. MIDA is also an approving authority. Many may not know this as well. For the manufacturing sector, MIDA provides all the necessary approvals. The very first approval is the manufacturing license. We issue the manufacturing license. Number 2, we also provide investment incentives. The tax break that was mentioned by Madam Secretary yesterday. Single agency. Yeah? We evaluate the project and then we provide the tax break. All right. Number 3, we also provide the approval for expatriate posts. Now, this is very unique. This comes under the purview of the Immigration Department. How is it possible for MIDA to evaluate the application for expatriate? We went to the government and we told the government that MIDA need to have that authority to evaluate expatriate posts because it goes together. Just imagine if the company were to apply the expatriate post to the immigration, what will happen? Okay? So the chances are 50-50, he may get or he may not get. So it has to be together with the project. So we got that mandate. The 4th approval that we gave is actually import duty exemption on machinery and equipment as well as raw material. This is purely customs issue. But again, we went to the cabinet and we told, no, we have to handle that together. So when a company comes to Malaysia for the manufacturing sector, we handle all 4 of these at one go. License, tax incentive, import duty exemptions, as well as expatriate posts. And that is the reason why I believe many of the countries out there feels we are the one-stop agency. Now, how is it possible for us to do all these things within one organization? We brought the immigration officer within MIDA. We have a representative there. We have the customs guys in MIDA, one representative there. Yeah? So in the committee, they are also there for them to give their views and comments. And that's how we get all these projects approved. And it is approved on a weekly basis. Every Thursday, we have this committee, sits together, and then the projects are approved together with the license, incentive, and whatnot. Now, promotion is easy, approval is also easy, I would say. But the toughest part is how do you ensure the projects are implemented on time? The problem lies with the implementation. Why? Because they have to acquire land, they have to build the factory, they have to get the necessary approvals, water, telecommunications, so on and so forth. How do you do that? And most of the time, the problem lies in the implementation. And here where MIDA gives the guarantee that the projects are implemented on time. How is it possible? We have MIDA offices in all the states, almost, except for 12 states, we have our MIDA offices. State offices are there. And they work together with the state authorities because lands comes under the purview of the local authorities. We are also convincing the local authorities, the state government, to become a one-stop agency as well. They must be promotional. No point of MIDA alone, or the federal government is very promotional going out there and attract investments when you have all this red tape and bureaucracy at the state level. So today, we are able to tell to the company that when you come in, tell us exactly what is the deadline for you to actually to go into operation. And that is the guarantee that we provide. Now, what happens after the company goes into operation? We have a division, dedicated division in MIDA called Post-Investment Division. You know what do? They listen to problems and issues. We have 20 officers there. Every day, water, electricity, immigration, you name it. GST, SST issues or whatever. They are there to actually to address these issues. They may not be able to solve the problem immediately, but we are able to mobilize the various government agencies. Yeah? So this is in a nutshell what we do. Yeah? From the day you attract and talk to the investor until the day when the company goes into production, even beyond that. And that is the reason why I would say so many companies are still there in Malaysia. They have not packed their bags and left to Myanmar or Vietnam. No doubt, today, we are promoting companies to move up the value chain. Malaysia is no longer a labor-intensive industries. Yeah? So therefore, if I want to share some of the most important elements, I would say it's very important, for example, the ratings. You may not like it. Businessmen out there, what do they look at? They don't know you. They don't know MIDA, for example. They want to know where is Malaysia ranked in terms of ease of doing business. You must move up the ranking. Today, Malaysia is ranked 15 in terms of ease of doing business. 15. We want to be one of the top 10. In terms of competitiveness, we are ranked 25, I think. We want to be up there. Why is this very important? Because the first thing they look at is your ratings, your competitiveness, ease of doing business. They don't fly to Nepal to know all this. They want to see from out there. How does the world perceive Malaysia, for example? So it's always a challenge, let me tell you. Yeah? Because most of these ratings and most of these rankings are also based on perception out there. Yeah? So you need to address this as well. And it's also a challenge, I would say. Until today, we are trying to overcome all these challenges. But I think we have done well. We have done well. And I think we are doing our level best, I would say. Because there are so many other countries within the region we are competing with. Yeah? Singapore, one, for example. Vietnam is coming up. Yeah? So we must always keep on improving ourselves and continue to do our level best to attract investments. Thank you.
I think listening to Maida experience, I think many of us feel that rather than Nepal, we should go to Malaysia to invest. So you have convinced us. But I think Nepal also has equally good opportunities, being a virgin land, as many of us said. So I'm sure that many of us are considering investing in Nepal in spite of not having an effective one-stop agency at the moment. But one of the very good, I think, things I personally learned from his presentation, perhaps Investment Board of Nepal and Maida, I don't know if you have some sort of formal linkages or networking who can, sit together and exchange notes and learn, from each other and put some systems in place. Because one-stop agency in Nepal also exists in our structure, but how do you fit in the government structure where there are different ministries, different departments, which is catered to deal with the domestic governance. And now here is another unique agency which is specially tailored to meet the requirements of foreign investors. Is it for domestic investors also, or is it only for foreign investors?
No, we handle both, yeah? This is a myth. People think that Maida only attract foreign investment. No. We are also attracting domestic investment as well. So in a given year, I would say about 60% or 55% is actually foreign investment. The balance is actually domestic investment as well. Yeah? So.
Thank you very much. I think that's sweet music to our ears, all of us in private sector. So this suggestion perhaps we would like to propose to IBN with MIDA, whatever relations we have at the time being, perhaps we can further strengthen it and increase our exchanges. We are coming to almost the end of this session, but I wanted to ask one very quick question to Ambassador Zafar before I request Mr. Lankes to give his concluding remarks. Nepal is also trying to develop its hydropower in a big way, and also we have cement industries, some mining potential industries, but these are natural resources of a country which exist in different parts of the regions and our country. But when you develop this kind of sector, what we have found, our experience is there are sometimes a little bit conflicting needs or conflicting agendas. For example, environment. For example, the local community who's living next to that mine or next to that river or next to that hydropower plant. And of course, the needs of the corporate house or company who's developing it. He has to develop it commercially, and make it a success. So these are sometimes the boundaries are a little blurred. How much the corporate can do. Many of these are development goals which the nation has to address perhaps, or other partners also have to come in. So this is sometimes we are facing problem in some of the projects we do. So how is it done in South Africa? Because you are a very good example of developing your mining industry to the fullest.
Thank you, Mr. Jyoti. I think the answer is similar to the one I started. It's about collaboration. In South Africa, South Africa's industry was built on mining. Our resources, natural resources, effectively our mining that we have, It's estimated, our reserves is estimated at over 1.5 trillion US dollars. That's the type of reserves that we have in South Africa. We have the bulk of the platinum deposits. 80% of the world's platinum deposits is in South Africa. So mining plays a key role. And what government has done is we have a process where we produce a mining charter. And the mining charter lays out the roles and responsibilities of all your key players. The private sector, the mining houses, the role of government, the role of the communities, the role of civil society. And the ultimate arbiter is our court system. Our courts are independent. I mean, our judiciary is extremely independent, so they are the final arbiters. But we have processes that lays out exactly what the relationship is. Also, what the private sector in this thing, in this process, the mining houses have to do for the mining communities, because obviously it's about rehabilitation, it's about those things. We have very strong environmental laws, effectively, while we're still a mining destination. But we've made sure that, effectively, that once you reach almost the end of life of a mine, the community is not left destitute. And that really is one of the key challenges in the way you address it. So the focus is to actually collaborate together. The private sector needs to see mining not as the normal, a sunset industry, but the sunrise industry. Effectively, you build on the process. We have taken our mining industry and use it to do our industrialization process. So for the fact that we now have a diversified economy, mining was the key focus. I've indicated the reserves that we have. But mining as a sector is a minor contribution to our GDP. But the manufacturing base has grown, and part of the growing of that base is, for instance, capital equipment, where we use equipment that we use in the mines, we now manufacture in South Africa. So we've used that basis to move towards that focus. So it's a process where you need to set the terms of engagement and the rules of collaboration right in front in the process. We have now gone through a process where we've done a mining charter, which did not have as much consultation as it was in the process. So the mining houses objected, and some of the civil society objected. The government has gone back and restarted the process, and we now have another draft mining charter which charts the way forward, but has all the key role players on board and all in agreement. And that really is the crux. I mean, for Nepal to move forward, it has to be collaborative. It has to be a process where you have your mining operations and the communities that live in the environment coming together and agreeing on how to move forward and how to effectively use the resource to the benefit of both sides. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jaffer. Now, I think we have come to the final moment of this session. Personally, I must say that this has been a great learning experience for me, listening to our very experienced panelists who came from different countries, 4 different countries. I'm sure the audience also has learned something useful, which I think we'll follow up in our own countries also. This will be a very valuable, I think, lesson which we got from this session. But now I think all of us talked about our specific country or specific organization or specific thing we do. But in the panelists, in the panel, we have a gentleman, Mr. Lankes, who is the only person among us who has the global perspective, because he works everywhere and he has a very macro perspective of all the issues which relate to economies like ours. So finally, may I request you to kindly sum up or make your concluding remarks based on what we discussed in this session. So, Mr. Lankes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Jyoti, and you're setting a very high standard here. Now, we've heard from very different perspectives, from different institutions, businesses, from the perspective of economics, from the perspective of business, and I think there's sort of a set of issues that come back in different ways, which all have to do with attracting investment in an effective manner. And I'm just going to relate some of the ones that I've picked up from this conversation. It shows how complex the challenge is to attract investment in a world in which countries compete. So I hear political stability as an important factor. It's very clear, it's kind of obvious to us all. We also know that this is an asset that Nepal brings now after a long time of instability. We hear about macro stability as an important factor, and again, Nepal brings this factor. We hear about the importance of a global, a favorable global environment. Mr. Schwartz spoke about the policies of the Fed. Let's not forget, Nepal is not fully in control of its agenda. There's a global agenda that needs to be supportive as well. We heard about the need for a vision from governments and for sector visions at that. There have to be concrete visions for investment. We heard about the need for legal protections. About the belief in open markets, which both in South Africa and in Malaysia were really central to the approach that these countries took to outward orientation, to embrace this outward orientation. In the case of Malaysia, that was true since the 1970s. I think in South Africa it's somewhat more recent, but those have been defining features of the approach to investment. We heard about the potential that Nepal's location offers to help knit together markets and be there central. We heard this from the UAE, and that is an asset that Nepal has. And then we heard about the importance of making life easy for investors, and that's true for foreign investors and domestic investors. The one-stop shop, the problem-solving and fixing unit that MIDA has, those were incredibly effective in the case of Malaysia, and we know in many other countries as well. That is where the approaches are going. Let's not scatter efforts around investment. Let's bring them together. And we heard about the value of getting measured through ratings, the bond ratings, which provide sort of a guiding post for finance ministers, and the doing business, ease of doing business ratings, which provides guiding posts for many other agencies of state that have to do with investment. And such ratings give a measure of transparency. They allow the efforts to be monitored. They make it simple for investors to compare countries, and that's why investors value these ratings so much. On all these fronts, there needs to be work, there needs to be an answer for successful investment attraction. And for me, one simple way for Nepal to go there is to bring Mr. Siva over and create the NIDA, the Nepal Investment Development Agency.
Thank you very much, the panelists. It was a very great honor for me to listen to all of you and help you present your views to the audience. And thank you very much, audience, for being so patient and attentive to these wonderful presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I'm sure coming from this very delightful discourse, all reaping from the experienced and very comprehensive views from our experts and front runners indeed. We take a moment to thank the panel, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very crucial of times for Nepal. It's a new beginning for us, and having to learn from the best practices, the experiences, and from the front runners, we believe is very fundamental for us at the moment to create that homegrown success story, and all this adds that extra momentum for us to help accelerate our pace of advancement. Thank you so much, the expert panel, for this very invaluable discourse herein. And as I take a moment from this particular panel session at this platform, I have the pleasure of inviting, on behalf of the organizers, Mr. Rajan Bhattrai, who is the advisor to the Right Honorable Prime Minister, to kindly come up on stage and extend our gratitude to our distinguished panel. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, we extend our gratitude to the session moderator, Mr. Padma Jyoti, Chairman of the Jyoti Group. And with much honor and much gratitude, here is extending a special gratitude to our special guest, the special speaker, Mr. Hans-Peter Langs, the Vice President for Economics and Private Sector Development, International Finance Corporation, IFC. And now to our esteemed panelists, namely His Excellency Abdullah Al-Saleh, the Under-Secretary for Foreign Trade, Ministry of Economy, the UAE. His Excellency Sadiq Zafir, Chief Director, Investment Promotion, Invest South Africa. Mr. Stefan Swartz, Senior Director and Head of Asia Pacific Sovereigns, Fitch Ratings. And finally, Mr. Sivasurya Murthy Sundararaja, the Executive Director from the Malaysian Investment Development Authority. And as we extend our gratitude to the panel once again, I request Mr. Bhattrai, along with the esteemed panelists, to kindly step forward for a group photograph. And thank you once again. With this session comes to an end, ladies and gentlemen. We will be having our next plenary, and that would be on financing for infrastructure development after a short break. Before you leave, I have two very important announcements to make. The first one is, of course, about the headsets. If you're leaving the hall, please return this or drop this by to the counter. The other is about to the foreign delegates. If you wish to go to the nearby Chandragiri Hills, which is a lovely hillock out alongside Kathmandu. That's for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. You will need to register with our decks at the Rose Garden. So if you wish to go to Chandragiri tomorrow morning, kindly register yourselves. Thank you so much. That's it. We'll see you back in about 10 minutes here back at the hall for the next plenary.